Great Britain. But the question was, how do you abolish it? 25% of Britain's GNP came from the slave trade. And slavery represented the largest source of energy for the entire British Empire, free human labor. And they said if we abolish it overnight, the economy is going to crater. But after a year of debate, Parliament made the moral choice and abolished slavery outright. And instead of collapsing, the British economy exploded as thousands of entrepreneurs rushed into that space to create new forms of energy, mainly mechanical ones, in an era that we now know as the Industrial Revolution, which was the greatest epic in wealth creation in the history of mankind. And the abolition of the slave trade had exposed all of these hidden inefficiencies that were associated with free human bondage. Well, today, we don't need to abolish foreign oil and local coal to understand that our deadly addiction to those substances is the principal drag on American capitalism. We are borrowing $1 billion a day, mainly from nations that don't share our values, in order to import $1 billion of oil a day, again, largely from nations that don't share our values, and some of them that are, outright hostile to us. We're funding both sides of the war against terror. We give hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies to the oil industry every year, mainly to protect, foreign oil lines. It's $100 billion a year to protect the Gulf oil lines for our military expenditures, and the current war in Iraq, according to OMB, is going to cost us over the 20-year period $4.3 trillion. Well, that's part of the cost of our addiction to oil. It's not reflected necessarily at the price we're paying at the pump, but still it's coming out of just a different pocket. The coal industry, the subsidies are probably much, much greater. Nobody's ever really taken the time to add them up, and they're hard to, but I've been litigating against the coal industry for many, many years, and it's one of the reasons that to me, natural gas looks like a God sent from heaven, because I've been to West Virginia, and I've seen what's happening in that state. A year and a half ago, I had a 6.5-week jury trial in West Virginia, and I won the biggest judgment in the history of this state. But I went down about 2 months ago to argue the appeal in front of the West Virginia Supreme Court. And as I was leaving the state, I was driving on a highway that felt like I was driving on a cushion. It was so soft and well constructed. And I said to the driver of the car, this highway feels like it's a carpet that we're driving on. He said, that's because there's 22 inches of asphalt on it. And, the Massachusetts Turnpike is 4 inches. The New York State Thruway has 4 to 6 inches. And I knew why there was 22 inches of asphalt, because the coal trucks weigh 90,000 pounds. And every inch of asphalt is millions of dollars per mile because this was a federal highway for the federal taxpayer, or there's 3,000 miles of these coal roads in West Virginia with 18 to 22 inches of asphalt on them. And the people of the state are paying, and that's one of the costs of coal that they don't talk about when they say, oh, it's only 2 cents a kilowatt hour, 11 cents a kilowatt hour, or whatever. They're not telling you that out of a different pocket you're paying for that coal road, and that coal road has to be repaired every 4 years, whereas the Massachusetts Turnpike has to be repaired every 20 years. So that's part of the cost of coal. Now, last summer, in August, the National Academy of Sciences released a report that said that every freshwater fish in the United States of America now has dangerous levels of mercury in its flesh. And that mercury is coming from coal-burning power plants. Every freshwater fish, we're living today in a science fiction nightmare where my children and the children of most Americans can now no longer engage in the primal, seminal activity of American youth, which is to go fishing in their local fishing hole and then come home and safely eat the fish. According to CDC, 1 out of every 6 American women now has so much mercury in her womb that her children are at risk for a grim inventory of diseases: autism, blindness, mental retardation, heart, liver, and kidney disease. I got my mercury levels tested recently, and I fish as often as I can. I went fishing 4 times this week. I work as well, but I was fishing. I live right on a pond, so I don't, it doesn't take that much time. So I want you to know that I am working. And but my levels of mercury, came back 10 times what EPA considers safe. I was told by Dr. David Carpenter, who's the national authority on mercury toxicity that a woman with my levels of mercury in her blood would have children with cognitive impairment, with permanent brain damage. I said to him, you mean she might have? And he said, no, 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 the science is very clear right now. Her children have some level of permanent neurological impairment. Probably he estimated a permanent IQ loss in those kids of 5 to 7 points. Well, according to CDC, there are now 640,000 children born in this country every year who've been exposed to dangerous levels of mercury in their mother's wombs. And, you know, that's part of the cost of coal that they don't tell you about when they say, oh, it's only, you know, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. I live 2 hours south of the Adirondack Mountains. My kids go fishing, hiking, hunting, kayaking up there and camping. And this is the oldest protected wilderness on the face of the earth. It's been protected as forever wild since 1885. We had a right to believe that generations of Americans would be able to enjoy those pristine landscapes unspoiled. But today, 1/5 of the lakes in the Adirondacks is sterilized from acid rain that's coming from those same plants, and which has also destroyed the forest cover on the high peaks of the Appalachians from Georgia to northern Quebec. If you go to EPA's website today, when you go home, there's a study there from the Harvard School of Public Health that says that ozone and particulates from coal-burning power plants kill 60,000 Americans a year. That's 20 times the number of people who were killed in the World Trade Center attacks. 1 million asthma attacks, 1 million lost workdays every year. This is part of the cost of coal, the price of coal, that they, again, they don't tell you about. I was, you know, then the coal ash, which is completely unregulated, and we know almost nothing about, you know, all of that stuff that they remove from the scrubbers, the arsenic and the mercury and the lead, the antimony and all of this are put in there's 548 piles of coal ash in this country, and virtually every place where they've measured it has found that that stuff is in the groundwater and it's poisoning people, and we know this. It's not, you know, this is not a rumor, this is not hysteria. We know that it is poisoning Americans and communities all across the country, and it's been completely unregulated. Well, that's part of the cost of coal that they, again, they don't tell you about. When I flew out of Appalachia this last time around, I flew over the Cumberland Plateau, and I saw something that if the American people could see it, there'd be a revolution in this country. We are flattening the Appalachian Mountains, literally cutting them down with these giant machines called drag lines that are 22 stories high. They cost $500 million. I flew under one of them in a Piper Cub. And they practically dispensed with the need for human labor, which indeed is the point. When my father was fighting strip mining in Appalachia back in the 60s, I remember a conversation I had with him when I was 14 years old, where he said to me, they're not just destroying the environment, they're permanently impoverishing these communities, because there's no way that they can regenerate an economy from these barren moonscapes that are left behind. And he said, you know, they're doing it so that they can break the unions in those states, and that's what happened. When he told me that, there were 151,000 unionized mine workers in West Virginia taking coal out of tunnels in the ground. Today, there are fewer than 19,000 miners left in the state. They're taking more coal out of West Virginia than they were in 1968, but you know, back then, at least some of that money was being left in the state for salaries and pensions and reinvestment in the community. Today, it goes all up, you know, to Wall Street, to corporate headquarters of Arch Coal, Peabody Coal, Massey Coal, Consul, which are all out-of-state companies. 95% of the coal in West Virginia is owned by out-of-state companies, and they're liquidating the state for cash with these giant machines and with 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate explosives that they detonate every day in West Virginia. It's the equivalent of a Hiroshima bomb once a week. They're blowing the tops off the mountains to get at the coal seams beneath. Then they take the rock, debris, and rubble, and they scrape it into the adjacent river valley, and they bury the rivers. According to EPA, they've buried 2,000 miles of America's rivers and streams. They have flattened an area, 1.4 million acres, an area larger than the state of Delaware. They have cut down the 500 biggest mountains in West Virginia. Well, this is all illegal. You cannot, in the United States, take rock, debris, and rubble and dump it into the waterway. You guys know, you know, from your industry, you can't just take produced water and dump it into a stream, right? And, well, they can't take rock and debris and rubble and dump it into a stream either. So, but they're doing it. So we sued them, and we won the suit in front of a conservative Republican federal judge, Judge Charles Hayden. And Judge Hayden said, this is all illegal. It's been illegal since day one. You can't do it anymore anywhere. 2 days from when we won that lawsuit, lobbyists for Arch Coal and Peabody Coal and Massey met in the back door of the Interior Department with Gail Norton's first deputy chief, Stephen J. Griles, who was a former lobbyist for Massey and Peabody Coal. And they rewrote the interpretation of one word of the Clean Water Act, the definition of the word fill, to change 30 years of statutory interpretation and to effectively overrule Judge Hayden's decision and make it legal, as it is today, to dump rock, debris, rubble, garbage, any solid material into any waterway in the United States without a Clean Water Act permit. All you need today is a rubber stamp permit from the Corps of Engineers, which in some districts you can get over the telephone or through the mail. And, we look at this and, environmentalists and the community members in West Virginia, we say, this isn't just the destruction of the environment. Ultimately, it's the subversion of American democracy. And, and it's the destruction of our essential values. And, we know this. We know that every nation that has gotten itself off of coal and foreign oil has experienced instantaneous prosperity. Iceland in 1970 was the poorest country in Europe. It was 100% dependent on imported coal and oil. The government of Iceland made a decision to decarbonize its society and there were naysayers. Within 15 years, they had accomplished that goal, and Iceland during that period went from being the poorest country in Europe to being the fourth richest country on earth by GDP. Now, unfortunately for Iceland, they spent virtually all of their newfound wealth on bundled derivatives, and they're once again the poorest country in Europe. But Iceland's economy is going to return because their fundamentals are very strong. That now they're one of the world's larger energy exporters. They can't run lines across the Atlantic, but they instead import bauxite from Jamaica, and they smelt it into ingots, and they sell the ingots on the international market. That's their way of exporting energy. I'm being given a sign that I have only 5 more minutes, so I'm going to truncate this speech, but let me say this. We have in our country, we have much greater geothermal than they have in Iceland. We have the greatest solar energy in the world, second greatest solar energy in the world. If we could put solar thermal plants, this is again theoretical because you could never do this in reality, but the Scientific American just did a study showing that if we put solar in an area 75 miles by 75 miles in the desert Southwest, you could power 100% of the energy grid in our country. We're #1 for wind in our country by far. North Dakota is the windiest place on earth at sea level. The Great Plains, the Saudi Arabia of wind. So we have, and the wind tends to blow at night in the Midwest. The sun, of course, everybody knows this, shines during the day. And, we have this abundant natural gas finds over the past couple of years. Some people say 1,000 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. With that combination, we can get ourselves off of foreign oil and domestic coal very, very quickly if we work together.